believe it is our responsibility to resist the injustices done by government in our names. We pledge to bring about freedom and peace. Another world is possible, and we pledge to make it real.
This is Anarchast.
Konnichiwa, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. We're coming in with a guest from Tokyo today. He's Mike Rogers, Mike in Tokyo Rogers, sometimes he's called. He writes on LouRockwell.com. He does a lot of interesting stuff. He does a lot of radio work in Japan. He's got a lot of interesting experiences in Japan, and we're going to talk about all that. But before we get into that, Mike, how did you become an anarchist?
Well, hi. Thanks, Jeff, for having me on Anarchast. Sumasen. How did I become a anarchist? That's actually a very long story, so I might try to make it short. But
take your time. I always like these stories.
I worked as a stockbroker, a financial advisor, right after I got out of college, and I worked at a company called I shouldn't say the company's name, but big company. And at that time, Reagan was president, and I was one of the young hotshot salesmen there. And one day I came back to the office, and they were having a party at the office. There's like 60 salesmen in my district. They were having a big party at the office, and most of these guys were retired military. So they were in their 40s, 50s, 60-year-old guys. And I walked in, and they were all having a toast and drinking. And I thought, this is great. I love this company, drinking at work. And they said, Mike, come on in, let's have a toast. And what are we toasting, guys? And they were all happy because we won a war. And, me too. At first I jumped in, yeah, this is great. We won a war. What do you mean we won a war? What are you guys talking about? What war? And the Vietnam War is over. We invaded Grenada. And they went on to tell the typical U.S. government story of how we rescued college students. Or I don't remember what the story was. But being a geek, when I was a little kid, I collected postage stamps. So I actually knew where Grenada was. So later on, I went to the library. Probably the next day, I went to the public library, and I started reading things and reading about it. And I realized that the official story wasn't true. And I actually went back to the office and got in an argument with a few guys because I said, we're supposed to be the beacon of democracy and blah, blah, blah. Why are we invading little countries that have democratically elected governments? And we're not supposed to be doing that, you guys. And by this time, I had already traveled to Japan. I'd been to Asia and traveled around quite a lot and started getting a little bit, jaded from the opinion that, the propaganda we're taught in America that's the greatest country in the world. And I started seeing things from the outside and started asking a lot of questions. And after that happened, like I said, I really thought this is bad. And at my job too, if you've seen the movie Wolf on Wall Street, we weren't quite that bad, but my bosses were very much involved in I don't want to use the word fraud, but tricking people and churning their money just to generate commissions. And when we did that to people who had strokes or who were handicapped, I found that was it for me. And then in 1984, I moved to Japan. And at the time, I wanted to just live in Japan because I'd been to Japan several times. I loved it. People here are so chilled out. They're not in your face. People very rarely state any opinions about the government except for they think the government's screwed up. And I really enjoyed that. And then I went down to Hiroshima and I saw the atomic bomb, the dome, and read all the plaques and started really studying into that. And it really affected my thinking. And I can't remember, I think it was 2002 or 3. I wrote my first article for Lou Rockwell, and it was called "You're in the Army Now." And it was how, when I go back to the United States, if I watch the Super Bowl or the World Series or whatever it is, it just seems like propaganda for the military. And I work in broadcasting now, so I'm very, what do you say? I'm very prejudiced about how propaganda or marketing is done on television. So when I saw these commercials for be all you can be the military, the few, the proud, the Marines, or whatever, it really got me thinking, because you never see stuff like that in Japan. Never. You might go to the train station and there might be a little poster, like a little piece of paper poster on the wall somewhere off in the corner that says, looking for people to join the self-defense forces, what they call the military here. But you'll never, ever see this mass saturation of media propaganda for people to join the military in Japan. That never happens. So from doing that, I'm so happy Lou Rockwell accepted my article and printed it. And from that, I started reading Lou Rockwell every day. And I was very happy, because I thought, wow, here's a bunch of people who think like me. And then the more I read into that, I actually got to the point where I started thinking, like, no, some of these people don't go far enough. And then an article by a gentleman named Butler Schaefer called "What is Anarchy?" that totally set me off. I thought, that's right. So my idea and goal is, I don't need a leader. We don't need to elect someone to lead. I don't need someone to lead me. I can screw up my own life by myself. Other people telling me what to do. I don't need them, and I don't need to tell them what to do. So I think we should strive for a goal of personal responsibility, families taking care of families like it used to be. And in Japanese society, still today, in a lot of families, grandparents live with the parents who live with the grandchildren. And I think this is one of the big reasons why crime is not what it is in the States, and society still has a moral fiber, and it's a very nice place to live in that sense. So that's how I got into there. Very long-winded explanation, excuse me.
No, that's great. Very interesting story. And I want to talk about your media experiences and how they really do put out propaganda. But before we get into that, I'd like to talk also about Japan. I think it's a very interesting topic. I've spent some time over there. I once spent a whole summer. I rented a house over there. And yeah, it's a very interesting culture, and I really do enjoy the culture myself as well. It's it's just amazing. Like, even watching that the tsunami that happened there a few years ago, just the how unchaotic it was. It was so. It was amazing. Like, if that happened in the U.S., I don't know what would happen. Like, people would just be panicking. There'd be looting. There'd be all kinds of just craziness. The army would roll in to help, like they helped the Superdome, and but over there it was like almost like organized and just calm, despite the tremendous amount of unbelievable wreckage and damage that was going on. The entire town's just being washed away in seconds, and. People were taking videos, and they weren't really going crazy. They weren't really like screaming or anything. They were just sort of watching it and trying to help people if they could. But other than that, there wasn't a real sense of panic. If that happened in the U.S., I don't know. I really don't even know what would happen. Just be total true chaos.
Yeah. Right after that tsunami happened, some friends and I took a camera crew up there, and we made a documentary about it. And we. Everybody wants to help. Everybody wants to do something. We don't know what to do. So we knew all these charities were popping up, and they were having these dinners and fundraising events. So we made a white label, all of these charities to use, and we gave it all to so many charities. Go ahead, show this at your dinner show, and I'll send you a link if you want to see it. It's about 10-minute long, and it's professionally made, so kind of a heavy situation there.
Yeah, no kidding. What's the you talked about Japanese style and how they rarely ever talk about political things, except for just to say that it sucks and it's screwed up. What's the philosophy of anarchy like in Japan? Is there many Japanese people who actually understand the ideas of not even having a government?
That's a hard one. In a lot of ways, Jeff, I'd say that Japan is 50 years behind the United States, 40 or 50 years. And that involves a lot of things. 40, 50 years ago, the United States, I think, had good service at restaurants and stores and places you went to. People were more polite to each other. Crime wasn't bad. That's basically the situation we have in Japan now. And I think also in America, the 40, 50 years ago was more kind of a leave it to beaver type of setup where the family actually, there was some, I mean, I might be confused about this, but it seems there's some kind of idea that the government was benevolent. And people here in this country, you'll meet some foreigners, of course, who are anarchists, but generally speaking, Japanese people, there's very few. And there's a really great guy, his name is Mark Abella.
Yes, I know him. He was actually a past guest on Anarchast.
Okay, he's always trying to get me to make videos and stuff for him. And he's a great guy, and he's helping set up the Mises Institute, and he's having a lot of anarchy meetings, anarchist meetings there. And from what I understand, he's gotten 5, 6, maybe 20 Japanese to come, which really astounds me. And I don't know where he found these people, but even my own family, I raised kids, and I've been telling them this stuff since they were little. Even my own family, my oldest daughter the other day said to me that she thought it was a good thing that the police sometimes have these stops on the streets where they randomly stop cars at night to see if you've been drinking. And I was just so surprised that my own daughter would say that, kick her out of the house and make sure she never comes back here for saying that again. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look back at the beginnings of the real anarcho-capitalist movement, you could say, in the U.S., that was probably, I don't know the exact dates, but probably 30, 40 years ago, was people like a small group of people, like 10 people. It'd be Ron Paul, Ayn Rand, Lou Rockwell, Murray Rothbard, and a few other people like that. And I've heard the stories from people that were there, including Wendy McElroy. She was in some of these meetings, and it was just like what you were describing that Mark Abell is doing. It was like 10 people, and and look at how many people have really blossomed out of that now. There's got to be at least hundreds of thousands of people who understand anarchy and call themselves anarchists now in the U.S. So it can really expand, but of course it takes time. So it will be interesting to see how that develops, especially with what the Bank of Japan is doing now. And the government debt situation in Japan is beyond ludicrous. It's something like 500% debt to GDP. And because of that, and actually half the Japanese government's budget goes just to pay interest payments alone.
That's right.
And interest right now is like 0.25%. So if it goes to 0.5%, all the entire budget of the Japanese government will go to pay interest payments alone. So this is coming very close to a complete end and collapse of either the yen or the government of Japan, or both. And that will be interesting to see how the society there handles that.
Yeah. Well, all right. Okay, you convinced me. I'll go to the anarchist meeting next time then. But
yeah, you might.
I blog, and I'm not an economics expert. I just like, for my own self, and I check these things out. So I've been keeping since 2008 or so, keeping track of grocery prices. And there's certain select items that I keep track of the price of. And basically, even with Abe's plan of raising interest or inflation, prices of a lot of goods are still creeping down. And, I think this is a good thing, of course, because deflation is a good thing, even in spite of all the propaganda we're told. But gasoline and things like that have really skyrocketed. Gasoline has gone up way more than 10% in the last, I'd say 14, 15 months. Oops, sorry about that. Yeah.
Well, the yen's really collapsed a lot in the last year, and of course Japan has no oil supply, so to actually import that oil, of course it's going to get more expensive. But now they're talking about doubling the money supply in the next 2 years, so that would pretty much double prices of almost everything, especially anything imported, within the next couple of years, because that will half the value of the yen. So it's
okay. I'll give you a good anecdotal story about how messed up the government is on this. Okay, so how much did the yen devalue so far? You said.
I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm pretty sure it was down like 30% in the last 6 months or so.
That's right. It's 25 some percent. Okay. In July, the Japanese government raised the price of wheat, because almost all wheat is imported into this country. So, but they raised the price of wheat by 10%. Now, that doesn't make any sense, you know. I mean, first off, they're getting involved in what the wheat price is, so we know this is bad. But they raised the price by 10% when the Japanese yen has devalued by 25%. So we have a 15% gap there. So what's happened is they don't want to raise the wheat price by 25% because people will be up in arms. So they're doing some more creative financing, and they're robbing Peter to pay Paul to fund this increase in wheat prices, so that it's not 25%. It's only 10% to the people, but actually they're getting that other 15% from over here or whatever they're doing. And this is how the shell game is done. You know, it just keeps going on. It's just absurd. Yeah, I think we're going to figure it out sooner or later.
Oh yeah, no. You can ignore reality for a while, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. And reality will come into effect at some point. You can only play these games so far, and actually, Japan's got one of the worst situations for having the ability to continue to play these games because of all the debt they have, and the demographics are quite aging now. A lot of people are retiring, so a lot of those people who were very productive, and that's why Japan has done very well in general. It's been quite prosperous for the last few decades, is because they're very, very productive people, but a lot of those people now are stopping to be productive and they're retiring, and now they're expecting to get their government retirement now, and they're not going. There's no money there, so it's going to be interesting in that.
Yeah. So our current budget deficit, and I think James Corbett can tell you a lot more about that than me. But it's been, I think it's 19 months in a row of trade deficit. Last month was the biggest trade deficit in history, and the month before that was the biggest in history, and then the month before that was the biggest history. It just keeps going up and up and up, and they keep talking about what we're going to do about energy. But James Corbett pointed out in an article recently, I think it was James, saying that one of the problems is they wanted to devalue the yen, and they want Japanese companies to recycle that money back into the Japanese economy. But a lot of these big Japanese companies are taking that money and using it for their overseas operations, and they're not bringing it back to Japan because they expect the yen to devalue more. So why would they bring the money back and just lose the value of it? And so it's kind of a catch-22 situation there.
Yeah, and James Corbett is another past Anarchast guest, and he lives there in Japan. So that's 3 people coming in from Japan, so that's a good sign. None of them are actually Japanese, but maybe hopefully we get some local Japanese people into Anarchy as well. And they're going to learn, there's going to be a lot of changes in the next few years there, so it's going to be interesting. So the more we can spread this sort of free market word over there, it could be helpful, because there's going to be a massive change. I don't know exactly what's going to change, but something dramatic is going to happen.
I'm Japanese, Jeff.
What's that?
I'm half Japanese.
Oh, okay. So we got a halfer.
We'll find some more. But Japanese people, only 3% of all Japanese people can speak English.
Yeah, I really noticed that when I was over there.
Before we move on to one thing, I want to show you something, and I don't know if you can see this, but I've got my handy dandy little made in Ukraine Geiger counter here.
Okay.
I don't know. Can you see what it says?
Yeah, I think it says 0.08.
Yeah, 0.08. Okay, this is microsieverts per hour of the background radiation in Tokyo as of right now. I live about 170 miles south of Fukushima. I just checked a minute ago, and the background radiation in Hong Kong is not 0.08, it's 0.14. So it's almost twice what it is in Japan. New York is 0.12 as of right now. this moment. So I'm not saying that Fukushima is not a bad situation. It's very bad, especially there. But these people who are saying that the West Coast is melting and sea lions having their teeth falling out, sea lions are not the kind of, most, sea animals are pretty sedentary and they stay in their little territory. So I think you're pretty safe over there. Don't worry so much about it.
Yeah, I talked a lot with James Corbett about that too, and just it's a bad situation. It's not good at all, especially there. In that immediate vicinity, it's definitely not good at all. It's bad, very bad. But it's not. It's so much. There's people moving away from the entire northern hemisphere, the entire west coast of the U.S. because they think there's actually more radiation in California definitely more than in Tokyo, just because of all the past nuclear government tests they used to do. They've done hundreds of them in that area, and so the people who are panicking about Fukushima, I think it's nowhere near as bad as what they're saying, and it could get worse. But even if it does get worse, I don't think it's going to be a world-changing event by any means. It'll just kind of suck.
We need to take care of the environment, and we need to try not to pollute it. And it's just one more pollutant to worry about. I laugh at Americans who are, 250 pounds, 280 pounds, 300 pounds. They're eating fast food and things like that, and they're worried about Fukushima killing them. Actually, it is laughable.
Yeah, totally.
I'll be going up to Fukushima on March 15th to shoot another documentary with a very famous Japanese soccer player and some people from the Italian government. So it should be fun. They won't think it's fun, but I think it's fun.
Yeah, you've worked in media. I don't know how long you've worked in media, but I know for a while. And you've told me some stories, and I've read some of your writings about your experiences and how the media really twists and is really a form of propaganda.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't you explain a little bit about that from your personal perspective?
Well, okay, I can say this on your Anarchast because of your audience. I've worked in the media for a long time. I used to work at CNN in the late 80s in Japan, and now I am a news reporter for one of Tokyo's major broadcasting stations. I report the news on Friday mornings, and we're supposed to read the news off of the big Japanese, one of the big Japanese news sites, news sources, and it's just painful. I hear the other newscasters reading this stuff, and I really wonder about them. And, for example, they'll talk about, the other day, they'll talk about Dennis Rodman. And they'll talk about Dennis Rodman going to Korea and people complaining about how Dennis Rodman is, helping out a tyrant and someone who is the enemy of the United States. And, it sounds like some kind of propaganda you'd hear from a movie, but it's happening in real life. And I wonder why, the media will report that, North Korea is having war games or doing this or doing that. But you never hear that, B-52 bombers are buzzing over, the border of North and South Korea. They don't tell you that, the United States carpet bombed North Korea in World War II, flattened Pyongyang, bombed bridges, hospitals, schools, dams, killing hundreds of thousands of civilians. You don't hear this stuff, but you just hear that this, I don't even know what his name is, Kim whatever.
I call him Little Kim.
Okay, whatever, and is a tyrant, and he's really hurting his people. I have a hard time with any, pardon me, American saying anything bad about the North Korean government. I mean, they're not bombing people in the Middle East 24/7 with drone attacks. They didn't bomb us in 1950. We bombed the hell out of them. That's one example. Another example would be like, for example, SARS or swine flu or bird flu. We go through this nonsense every 4 or 5 years where they'll come in the news reports and they'll tell you 50 million people are going to die from this, and we're supposed to read this on the air, and all it does is scare people, and it never comes true. I think, up till now, worldwide SARS, 200 people haven't died yet, and these were things that happened in 205. So we're constantly spouting out this propaganda as fact. So I have my own little saying, Jeff, about TV, and I'm proud of myself for thinking of this. 90% of everything you see on TV is bullshit. The other 10% are commercials. So, you can't believe anything. You got to take everything with a grain of salt. People need to study, and things like this Anarchast and the internet are good, but also on the internet there's a lot of propaganda. Oh.
Yeah, but at least we have access to some real information too, which is not an option on TV.
No. So I can't. I threw our TV out of our house more than a decade ago, so I don't miss it at all. I can't stand it. People tell me, like, you work in TV, you don't have a TV at home? You'd be surprised, Jeff. Most people who work in TV don't have a TV at home.
That's interesting.
So,
yeah, it's really great to see now that there was a poll done, and more people get their information from the internet now than from TV or radio or newspapers. And I think that's a big part of why there's a lot of things happening right now, because people are actually getting access to real information for the first time pretty much in human history. Yep. And like you said, it's not all true, and not everything you read on the internet is true, but at least you can do your research and find information. And a lot of this stuff is very well documented, and there's a lot of great people out there doing a lot of great work, like James Corbett, putting together all the information, and then you can at least have access to that information, so you're not just sitting there. It's not like you turn on the internet and it goes, SARS, it's going to kill everybody, and that's it, like it is with TV. There's other voices and there's other information. One of the interesting things that we talked about recently was about, there's quite a bit in the news, again, in the media, about the Japanese hate the Chinese, Chinese hate the Japanese.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and you were telling me that it's quite a bit different than what you see on TV.
Yeah, I... being someone who works in the media and also having a lot to do with music, my company basically makes music-related programming and alternative music, punk, and things like that. And so I know a lot of people in the music business. So I'll just give you one example. So, they were talking about Abe, the Japanese Prime Minister Abe, and the Senkaku Islands, and China and all the mucky muck that's going on over there, and how much the Japanese and the Chinese hate each other. But I think, you can definitely find a lot of Japanese and a lot of Chinese people who hate each other, and even young people. But I submit to you that these are very outside people. The average person doesn't care. And I'll give you another good example. There's a Korean band called Big Bang, B-A-N-G, Big Bang. Most people in the West have never heard of them. Now, in Japan, over this last 15, 20 years, sales of Western artists, and I mean like Lady Gaga and, Justin Bieber, whatever, their sales have just dropped off the cliff. It used to be these people could come to Japan and they would sell out Tokyo Dome 2 or 3 or 4 nights in a row. Michael Jackson was the last one who was able to do that, and that was in the 90s. Today, big names come to Japan, the biggest names, Oasis or whatever, they can't sell the Tokyo Dome. They'll go out in Saitama, which is pretty far away, and sell the Saitama Arena, which holds about 14,000 people. Tokyo Dome holds 55,000 people. And recently, Paul McCartney has come to Japan, and he played, I think, 2 nights at Tokyo Dome. They sold out in about 2 weeks. The Rolling Stones are coming here pretty soon. It'll be the first time the Rolling Stones have been here in 10 years. And I think they're going to sell out the Tokyo Dome. It'll take a couple of weeks, but I haven't heard that they're sold out yet. And the tickets, I'm not exactly sure, but I believe the tickets went on sale 2 weeks ago. Big Bang, a Korean band, a pop idol group, comes to Japan every year. They came here last year. They came here this year. 3 nights, that's 160-some thousand tickets sold out in 3 hours. And these tickets sell for $100 a piece. And this place is just packed with screaming 17, 18, 19, 20, 25-year-old girls. And they love these people. And I know this for a fact because I don't believe what I hear on the media. I talked to my 25-year-old daughter and I talked to my 19-year-old daughter who's a college student, and I asked them both, is this true? These guys are popular. My 25-year-old daughter, who is always like, you know, David Bowie or Suede and bands like that, is really into British music, but she told me that everybody knows who these people are and they are huge. My 19-year-old daughter told me that all of her friends love this band and they want tickets, but you just can't get them. So, I mean, money talks, right? There's not a person, when it comes to young people and music's a very big part of people's lives. They don't care about what Abe's doing, and they don't care about these islands. It has nothing to do with their life. They want to have fun, and they want to enjoy themselves, and they think, oh, you're from Korea, so, and that's what they think. And I've heard this from many young people, and I wrote an article about that on Lou Rockwell and got bombed by a lot of people about that. And but I confirmed it over and over with young people that I talked to, even people who are up to, I consider 35 years old young. I've even asked them, and they told me, yeah, everybody knows these bands, and nobody cares about Korea, or if you're Korean or Chinese, nobody cares. They just, you know. So a lot of Westerners told me that this is wrong because Japanese people should study more, and they need to learn more about history, because if we don't learn history, we'll repeat it. Yes, I understand that. But, you know, academically, Japanese students and Koreans and Chinese students score well above their Western counterparts. So I don't know about if they need to study more. They do know the history, maybe not enough. Who does know enough? But, you know, as far as hating Koreans because they're Koreans like their grandparents did, that's not happening in this country now.
Interesting. You actually mentioned something earlier that I thought was interesting. You were saying that they were on the radio there. They were talking negative things about North Korea, and of course, there's a lot of negative things about North Korea. Mm-hmm. I'm definitely not a fan of the government over there. Same as almost any government, but they're especially bad. But you mentioned that one of the reasons that they were talking about North Korea, they said, if I heard you correctly, that he's anti-American and therefore he's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, do the Japanese people not know what happened in World War II, how the U.S. government blockaded Japan, wouldn't let oil supplies through because they wanted to get into World War II? So they basically forced the Japanese government, to do something, because they were about 7 days away from not having any energy on the island. And that's the reason that they decided to do that Pearl Harbor attack. And then long after the war was pretty much over, two of the biggest terrorist attacks in the world were conducted by the U.S. government in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Just dropping a nuclear bomb on an entire city of civilians, of just regular men, women, and children. It's bizarre to me that anyone would be very pro-American in Japan.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm 56 years old now, Jeff. So, you know, of course, I know a lot of people my age. The older Japanese people who are, I mean, I'd say people who are over 40, 45, they all know about the blockade. They all know about Japan running out of oil, and they all know about Nagasaki and Hiroshima, of course. But Japanese are very, what do you say? What's the term? Well, they're very realistic about things. They know these things are true, but they also know that the Imperial Japan government pre-1945 was very bad and very brutal. So they think, their way of thinking, it's a very Japanese way. They think like, yeah, these bad things happened to us, but also, you know, our government was bad too. So you can't really say that these people are totally bad or these people are totally bad. And this is let me get off on a tangent here. If you have a car accident in Japan, it's almost never, I mean, I've never heard of it, 100% one person's fault or another person's fault. You could be driving along a street and a side street is here and it says stop there on their side, and you're driving along slowly, and they don't stop and they hit you, they'll still say it's 30% your fault. Because if you were driving defensively, and this is true, you could have avoided that accident. So the insurance companies will talk to each other, because this has happened to me. I was driving along, a lady just rode right through the stop sign, and she hit me. I thought for sure, that's 100% your fault, lady. But my insurance company settled for me paying 30% of the damage. But this is the way the Japanese people think. There's no, maybe it's Buddhism or something, but there's no possible way that in any kind of fight or discussion, it can be 100% this person's bad, 1%. It's always, there's some part of responsibility that I must accept on my own. So the Japanese feel that the imperial government was doing a lot of bad things, and the United States did a lot of bad things too, but ultimately the United States, took over Japan and put us on a so-called capitalist footing, and led to the economic miracle. And so actually that was a good thing. That's what they think. And the young people think.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, of course, yeah. It was quite amazing after World War II, because of course the big sort of enemies of the U.S. and the West, I guess you could say, were Germany and Japan, and those two countries went on to be some of the most productive capitalist places on Earth, and still to this day. And yeah, it's very interesting. And it's interesting to hear how people think about it. I actually like the way they think.
Yeah.
I would agree with that, actually, that it isn't 100% their fault, because when I drive very defensively. I'm watching every car, and I think everyone else should be too.
Yeah.
And if I see them going through that stop sign, I'm paying attention. Whereas in the U.S., they go so much towards all this legal stuff, and they have all the rules and everything, that people don't even really pay attention when they drive, because they just assume everyone else is going to follow all these rules exactly. And I see way more accidents in the U.S. than almost any country on Earth, really. People are just falling asleep while they're driving, because they're driving this exact same speed limit. They assume every single person is going to signal when they go into their lane, and so they just zone out. And then, of course, not everyone drives perfectly. And yeah, it's very interesting. Is there anything else about Japanese culture that you want to talk about? I find the whole culture and the society there to be just fascinating.
Oh, gee. Well, before we change the subject, though, Jeff, how long have you been out of the States? Basically.
Well, I was born in the Soviet Kanakistan, Canada, and I left there around 2002, and then I lived a year in LA, and that was like the worst year of my life. And then after that, so that was 2003, I took off on my boat, and I've lived all around the world ever since. I lived 4 years in Thailand, and I've been in Mexico here for about 5 years.
So have you, I don't know if it's just me, have you noticed, and I'm talking about what you were talking about, like about driving cars, and have you noticed that the American male is getting more and more obstinate in the last 10 years?
Define obstinate. I went to public school.
Okay, like hard-headed and so.
Oh God.
So steeped in their idea that they're right, that they cannot possibly even say, I'm wrong. I screwed up. I'm an idiot. I mean, how hard is that? But it seems like it's getting more and more difficult for the average American male to say, yeah, I made a mistake. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I see it all the time. Getting a lot more aggressive. Not a road rage in the U.S. Road rage doesn't exist, I don't think, anywhere else in the world except for the Western countries. And I think it's caused by all the rules and regulations, and people get very frustrated. I know I do. Like down here in Mexico, I don't stop at a stop sign if there's no one around. I roll right through it. But they're so enslaved. They have to pull up and wait a second. It might be 4 a.m. You can see, you might be on the prairies. You can see for a million miles in every direction, and they'll be out in the country road and stop sign. They'll pull up and hope and check to make sure there's no cops watching or cameras watching them, and that really affects a lot of things, and it makes people just more and more angry, and maybe like what you were saying, they're just. Well, there's so many things. They're surrounded by propaganda all the time. You turn on the TV, and it's just like, we're the best, we're the best.
Yeah.
And they're not the best. they're the worst, the U.S. government and the military. And, yeah, it's just almost like going to Bizarro Land, going back into the U.S. And of course, every other culture is different, and Japan has its own culture, and there's some bad things about it as well. But I much prefer a place like Japan, their culture, to the U.S. culture, where it's just constantly people yelling at each other, and
it's astounding.
Yeah.
Okay, about Japanese culture, and I know you don't have much more time. Let's talk about. There's so many things about Japanese culture I could talk about. Actually, this is kind of like more my expertise, not the economy or whatever. You want to talk about the Yakuza?
Yes, definitely.
They're a fun subject. Okay. Recently, since I think it was July of last year, July of 2013, the Japanese government started passing new laws and to protect the society, of course. And these laws are directed at organized crime, the Yakuza here in this country. And over these last, I'd say, 25 years or so, the Japanese government keeps making more and more laws, more and more difficult to be a Yakuza, a gang. It's not like the American-style gang member, more like maybe Italian-style mafia. But so over these last 25, 30 years, more and more Yakuza are becoming like the Yakuza you see in the movies, but they're becoming real estate agents, owners of golf courses, lawyers, and they're going into these types of fields, and that's how they're running their business. So, of course, they still do the local, neighborhood. They go down to the shopping center there and little mom and pop shops. They do the protection racket and make sure you get protection. But, well, this is, one good thing about the Yakuza, when they have honor, a code of honor. So when you pay them for protection, they protect you. They really do. Whereas,
it's like a service.
Yeah, you call the police when you want protection, they might show up in an hour. But excuse me. So they passed a new law, and the new law states that you cannot. I can look up exactly what it says. The exact terms of the law. Just give me one sec here. It says that you cannot work with or associate or do financial transactions with the Yakuza. So the hard part to understand here is the associate part, because Japanese language is very unclear and they don't say things exactly. So associate has a very broad meaning. Okay, Jeff. So I went to I don't want to say the pizza. I went to the big pizza company here, and I know the bosses there, and I went to talk to them after this new law came in, because they were worried, because you cannot associate with the Yakuza. That means that they're not allowed to deliver pizza to houses that they know are Yakuza, that Yakuza people live there. And they were upset, and they asked me what I thought. I just thought it was ridiculous. But what this means is, let's say it's the 18-year-old guy hops in his pizza truck. He drives over to some house. The guy answers the door there. Maybe by his clothes or whatever, you can tell he's obviously a Yakuza. This 18-year-old guy is supposed to tell this gangland leader, hey, man, I can't give you your pizza. You're a Yakuza. He's supposed to do that. And these other, if Yakuzas are out on the golf course, gangsters are out on the golf course golfing, the golf course is supposed to run out there and tell them, like, hey, you guys, you can't golf here now. Can you imagine Jeff walking into a group of 5 or 6 mafioso types and telling them, gentlemen, you can't golf on, you can't be putting here, gentlemen. It's so stupid. So what's happened is they've passed these laws, and all these companies, corporations are freaking out on how they can stay within the law. But de facto, what these laws are is a ploy by the government to get retired policemen on the management boards of these corporations. Because when these talks come up about how should we, conform with the law and follow the law, they have these retired policemen on their board there, the management board, and they can tell them how they can conform to the laws. And that's what's going on in this country now. So, last, I think it was in September, the police were raiding a lot of clubs in the Roppongi area because, for example, waitresses were sitting down at tables with customers. and waitresses were talking with customers at, not just taking the order, but actually sitting and chatting and drinking with customers. So this goes into possible prostitution or whatever, things like that. So they would arrest these restaurant owners. I'm not making this stuff up. This is what's going on. So they try to tell people that, the Yakuza are out of control and we've got to protect you and we've got to do these things. But the examples they use are just absurd. And for the average Joe Blow, the Yakuza, you see them around sometimes, but they're polite guys. They've never bothered me. I've never had any trouble with Yakuza people at all. And it's just nonsense that the police would pass more laws in order to make more things crimes, in order to expand the police budget. And that's one thing that's going on in Japan right now.
Yeah, that's going on all over the world, especially in the U.S. They must pass 1 million laws a day now. There was an old book. It said you break 3 laws every day, and that book I think was written 10 or 20 years ago. I think now it'd be like 30 or 300. You can't collect rainwater. You can't buy raw milk. You can't. And this is what government does. And actually, I prefer dealing, if I had to deal with one or the other. And actually, they're basically the same thing: government or Yakuza or the Mexican cartels.
That's right.
I'd much rather deal with the Yakuza or the cartels and than the government. They're usually quite a bit nicer. They usually don't bother too many people. Down here it's mostly drug related, and they don't bother anybody. They're very nice people, and they make a lot of money. And actually in Mexico it's kind of interesting. There's numerous cities right now that the people have run both the government and the cartels out of town. And then they get attacked. Then the government comes in and says, well, this is anarchy, and that's correct. And they say, well, we can't have this. So then they come in and start attacking the people, and it's just terrible with government. But many parts of this area is actually fairly controlled by the cartels. The police won't go into those areas. And just like what you said, they actually protect the community. There was this one community that had this problem. Some people were doing some kidnappings or stealing from people. And the people are getting really upset. And the cartel said, well, we got to stop this. This is our area. And he even set up checkpoints. So you come into this area, and there'd be a guy there. He's not the government. He's from some gang, cartel, and he'd be just checking your ID and stuff and looking in your truck and making sure, because they're actually protecting the community. Yeah. So it's kind of it's a funny thing.
So you've been to Japan. So you've been to Shibuya and you've been to Shinjuku.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So it used to be these were very, very safe places to go 30 years ago at night, but as I mentioned, about 25 years ago, they started changing the laws. So no longer, about 25 years ago, no longer are the Yakuza patrolling the streets in Shinjuku, some parts of Shinjuku, and now Korean gangs and Chinese gangs have come in, and it's not safe to go there at night. Shibuya has become that way in the last 15 years. Because it used to be, you couldn't go there and raise hell because the Yakuza guys wouldn't allow it. And one more example, actually, I think I wrote this on Lou Rockwell too, and I don't really like talking about this once, but I actually got rolled at night once about 15 years ago here in Tokyo. And all I can say is the guys who rolled me and beat me up, and I wound up in the hospital, and they stole my money, and I only had like $14. Anyway, I wound up in the hospital. After that happened, my daughter, who's a professional singer here, and there's a lot of Yakuza in the entertainment business, the boss from the area came to see me. And he told me, very polite guy, he told me that they can't allow this sort of thing to happen. And I'm supposed to tell him everything that I saw and who these people were. But I didn't know who they were, and it happened so fast. But the only thing I could tell him is, well, they weren't Japanese people. I knew that by their accent, the way they spoke. So, and they were making sure that this didn't happen again. And from what I understand from the news, that this had happened to 3 different foreigners near my area within the span of a month, and I haven't heard about that happening again, because they probably found out who these people were. And made sure that they go into another line of business. I'm sure they convinced them very politely. So, like you said, I wish we didn't have a government. I wish we didn't have a Yakuza. But if we didn't have a government, we wouldn't have a Yakuza, because the government wouldn't be making prostitution, gambling, all these victimless crimes, drugs. They wouldn't be making them illegal. The Yakuza come along to provide high quality product for people who want to buy it. And if the government weren't making these things illegal, we wouldn't need a Yakuza, would we?
No, that's right. They are created by the government, and not many people realize that. And then, of course, just like with the war on drugs in the U.S., they create this war on drugs, which is, completely immoral and heinous, and I call it a war on people. And then a lot of people go underground, just like during Prohibition, Al Capone in the 1930s, and they provide the service because people want that service.
Yeah.
But because they're underground, they can make a lot more money. And they also tend to attract fairly violent people because you really have no way to arbitrate disputes when you're underground. You can't go to a court or anything like that, or you'd get arrested for being in that business. And so then the government says, well, look, now there's gangs, there's Mexican cartels, so that's why we need government to protect us from them. And it's like, you created them.
Right, that's right. That's absolutely right. You're doing a good job, Jeff, that you're making this Anarchast, and you're telling people to get this, because I think there's so many people that are just so close to making this connection in their brain, but there's just that little leap. One more little leap till they realize, wait a minute, the government is causing this. It's just like I was telling you a minute ago about my daughter thinking that, random drunk driving stops on the road. She actually thought that was good because maybe they'll stop somebody from killing somebody. But, I just thought, maybe I'm getting off on a tangent, but I just thought, no, there's 8 million cars driving around here, people in cars driving around here in Tokyo at night. I don't see why they should stop everybody just to look for the one or two people. But
yeah, it's a crazy idea. It's a horrible idea. Of course, if all the roads were privatized, there'd be all kinds of companies coming up with all kinds of interesting solutions to fix a lot of these things, but they don't really want to fix any of those things. And yeah, you're right. There's so many people that are very close.
Yeah.
And it's getting very interesting because we're seeing just every day more people catching on to this, and just this crazy idea that, well, sometimes some people steal from people, and sometimes some people kill people. So let's give this one group of people all the power and let them steal from every single person about half their money every year to protect us from that random crime.
The Yakuza only want 10% of your money. The government wants 40 or 50.
Yeah, down here in Acapulco, the Hooters, there used to be a Hooters restaurant.
Oh.
And it was, of course, an American chain. And I don't think they paid much tax or any tax to the government, but one day the cartels came by and they said, hey, we want 10% or something. And they, being American, they closed it, and they said, that's terrible, Mexico's so corrupt. And they actually closed the restaurant because they said, we can't be in a country where it's so corrupt that they take 10% of your money every year. We're going to go back to the U.S. where they take 40% of your money every year, but they do it with a business suit and tell you it's your social contract, and it's, without us, it'd be much worse. And many people are catching on to this.
Yeah. Well, that's funny.
And
okay, last thing. That's funny you mentioned about Hooters. They opened a Hooters in Japan here in Tokyo. And I don't know if it's doing well or what. I don't go to things like that. But see, in Japan, this is like a real life adult Disneyland at this place. Even though prostitution is illegal, de facto illegal, there's a lot of places that you can go and get your get taken care of, so to speak. So Hooters is like what do you say, Denny's for like a sex-themed place. I mean, we've got the real thing all over the place here, so I don't know if Hooters is going to do okay in Japan.
Well, a funny side note is they actually someone reopened Hooters down here. They just named it a different name, but it's in the same location. They have all the same. Everything's the same. They just used all the old stuff from Hooters, and so I guess it's their loss. It's packed with people every day. And
all right, well, there you go. Independent businessman, good man.
Yeah,
excellent.
Very good.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I should let you go, and I don't know if you have anything last things you'd like to mention or
No, just
say.
I'm. Thanks for having me on your Anarchast, and sorry I'm not too up on the economy or these sorts of things. But if you want to just talk about silly little things like the Yakuza stuff, I'm up on that. or the media, things like that, and a lot of funny stories. I'm up for that. But I think you're doing a good job, Jeff. Now I realize why you're doing this. We're just talking about the little leap for people. So this is something like what you were talking about a little while ago with the Lou Rockwell and the first group of people who came in with the Anarchist meetings. And now look at how many thousands and thousands of people there are in the States. So this is a really good thing you're doing.
Yeah, back in like the early 1900s, communism was a pretty small idea, Marxism, communism, and they got all together in their meetings, and I'm sure their meetings were way worse than ours, like because they're all communists, they're probably all stealing from each other, and they're probably all poor, and look at what that grew into. It grew into a huge movement, and that only took a few decades, and so our movement's much better than communism. It's almost exact opposite of communism. It's really good, and the message is such a great message. Just don't initiate violence against other people, and you don't want them to do that to you. Do unto others. That old Jesus message that's sort of been forgotten quite a bit, or even booed now. There was Ron Paul was speaking in North Carolina at a GOP debate, and he mentioned the Golden Rule, right. And this is in the Bible Belt of the U.S., and he got booed. I don't know what's going on with some of these people.
Well, they're into the American Jesus, you see. This is a different.
Oh, the warmonger Jesus.
Yeah, the American Jesus. It's better. It's proved.
All right, so that's it for Anarchast. I'll let Mike go and enjoy your day in Tokyo. I wish I was there for the ramen. I love street ramen in Tokyo, and
it's meat.
Yeah, for sure. We'll have some ramen and some beer. All right, so that's it for Anarchast. Your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.